A cold wind swept through the skeletal frame of the Ferris wheel, moaning like a lost soul as it spun slowly in the breeze. The rusted giant loomed over Ethan as he trudged up the hill towards the town. It was late afternoon, the sun sinking lower in the sky and painting the clouds with streaks of orange and purple. Black Hollow had been abandoned for almost 70 years now, ever since the mine at the heart of the settlement had collapsed, taking the lives of over 300 men. But it was that very tragedy that drew Ethan here. He was a young historian with a passion for forgotten tales, and he wanted to learn everything he could about the town as sudden demise. As he made his way down the dusty main street, he saw signs of life, or at least recent visitors. A tent had been pitched in front of the general store and a campfire had been built nearby. The tent was still warm, suggesting the campers had only just left. And on the table by the fire were 2 half-empty cans of beans, a pack of cigarettes, and something that made Ethan's blood run cold: a journal. It was bound in worn leather and held together with a frayed piece of string. The pages inside were brittle and yellowed with age, the ink faded and smudged in places. As Ethan read, he felt a connection to the author, a man named Samuel Blackwood, who had written these entries almost a century ago. Blackwood had come to Black Hollow seeking a fresh start after serving in World War I. He found work at the mine and eventually married a woman named Mary, who lived in a small house at the edge of town with her brother Thomas. Life was hard, but good. That was until one day when Samuel discovered strange symbols carved into the wall of the mine. They were unlike anything he'd seen before, geometric shapes and lines that seemed to twist and writhe like living things. At first, he thought they were just the product of a deranged miner's axe, but then he found more of them in other places around town, even in the walls of his own house. Samuel had never been much for religion, but as the entries progressed, he began to speak of God and prayer. He wrote of nightmares that clung to him like cobwebs and whispered voices that scratched at his sanity. Then one day, he simply stopped writing. Ethan closed the journal, feeling a chill crawl up his spine. He tucked it away, deciding to continue his exploration of the town. By the time the last sliver of sunlight slipped below the horizon, Ethan had found a few more artifacts from the town's former inhabitants: a rusted pickaxe with a broken handle, a pair of muddy boots by the well, and a child's doll lying face down in the dirt street. He decided to make camp near the river, far from the unsettling reminders of the town's past. As he built a small fire, he kept an eye out for nocturnal wildlife, always alert for danger. The forest surrounding Black Hollow was said to be home to bears and mountain lions, but Ethan's biggest fear was something else entirely: whatever had driven the people of Black Hollow insane. He huddled by the fire as darkness fell, listening to the wind whistling through the trees. Every crackle and pop sent a jolt of adrenaline through him, and every shadow seemed to take on a menacing form. Just when he was beginning to relax, he saw it, a faint glow in the distance. At first, he thought it might be a campfire, but there were no other signs of human activity. He watched as the glow grew brighter, and then he saw a shape emerge from the trees. It was humanoid, but far too tall to be a man. It stumbled towards him, and as it drew closer, Ethan could make out details. It wore what looked like a tattered black coat and a top hat, and its hands were long and spindly, like the limbs of a spider. Ethan scrambled back, knocking over his fire. He ran, crashing through the underbrush, the creature's heavy footsteps pounding the ground behind him. He didn't dare look back, but he could hear it getting closer. Then, suddenly, as if it had hit an invisible wall, it stopped, its heavy breathing echoing in his ears. Trembling, Ethan came to a halt by a large boulder, pressing his back against its rough surface. He was soaked in sweat, his heart hammering in his chest. Then he heard a strange sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the forest to its core. Then, silence. Cautiously, Ethan peeked around the boulder. The creature was gone. In its place was a small pile of ash. He reached out, his fingers brushing against cold, powdery ash. It was like touching snow. He looked around frantically, searching for any sign of the creature, but there was nothing. Shaking with fear and adrenaline, Ethan gathered some sticks and tried to build another fire. As the flames sputtered to life, he noticed something strange. The fire seemed to have an unnatural color, a sickly green tinge. He stared at it, mesmerized, and that's when he saw it again, the glow from earlier coming from the direction of town. He knew he should run, get as far away from Black Hollow as possible. But something was keeping him there, some morbid curiosity perhaps, or a misguided sense of bravery. He stood up and started walking towards the glow, drawn to it like a moth to a flame. As he walked, he noticed strange symbols painted on some of the buildings, the same ones he'd seen in the journal. They seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, guiding him deeper into the heart of the town. He approached the Ferris wheel, its silhouette looming over him like a skeletal guardian. Beneath it, the ground seemed to pulse with an eerie green light. Then he saw it, a faint glow coming from one of the cabins near the Ferris wheel. He hesitated for a moment, fear gnawing at him, but then he knocked on the door. After a moment, the sound echoed through the empty street. There was no reply. Ethan knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. He tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. As he stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind him, and the last sliver of daylight vanished, plunging him into darkness. In the sudden blackness, Ethan panicked. He tried to find the door, but his hand brushed against something soft and yielding. He screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a chair. Something scuttled away in the darkness, and Ethan could hear its claws scraping on the wooden floor. Then it spoke. Its voice was raspy and weak, like the sound of dead leaves skittering across pavement. "Who's there?" it croaked. Ethan found his voice. "Hello," he called out, his voice shaking. "Is anyone there?" "What do you want?" the voice rasped. Ethan took a deep breath. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I was hoping to learn more about this town, about what happened here." There was a long silence, and then the voice spoke again, this time closer, too close. "You shouldn't be here," it whispered. "This place is cursed." Suddenly, a match flared to life in the darkness, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The figure advanced, and Ethan could see its face, pale and emaciated, with eyes that glowed with an unearthly light. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered, his fear giving way to fascination. "I am the keeper of this place," the creature rasped, its voice echoing strangely in the small room. "And you should leave while you still can." Before Ethan could respond, the creature shuffled away, disappearing into the darkness. He could hear it moving about, dragging itself closer to the door. Then he heard scratching, desperate scratching at the wood. "Please," the creature rasped, its voice filled with urgency. "Don't let them in. Please." And then it was silent. Ethan cautiously approached the door, his hand hovering over the knob. What was out there? Was it friend or foe? Did it want to help him or harm him? He took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He needed to get out of this cabin, out of this town. He turned the knob and stepped out into the darkness, leaving the secrets of Black Hollow behind him. As he walked away, the faint glow from the cabin followed him like a beacon, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the abandoned town. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel the eyes of the creature on him, watching him go. The tunnel stretched before him like a gaping maw, swallowing up his headlamp's feeble beam almost immediately. The air grew colder as he ventured further in, a damp chill that seeped through his clothes and settled in his bones. He should have turned back at the entrance, he thought, when the silence had pressed in around him, thick and heavy like the suffocating darkness. But something had drawn him in, something he couldn't quite name, yet felt in the deepest recesses of his being. Behind him, the entrance to the mine was nothing more than a pinprick of light in the oppressive gloom, and with each step he took, the whispers grew louder. At first they were unintelligible murmurs, but as he neared the source, the words began to form, coalescing into chilling pleas that tugged at his heartstrings. "Help me," they cried. Please, please help us." His pace quickened, driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate hope that he might find some answers down there in the belly of the earth. He remembered the stories the old miners had told, tales of the mountain's dark heart and the horrors that lurked within. But he dismissed them then as nothing more than campfire yarns, embellishments designed to keep young lads like him from wandering too close to danger. Yet now, standing on the precipice of that very danger, he wasn't so sure. His headlamp cut through the gloom, revealing a scene that made his blood run cold. The tunnel wasn't empty. Miners, or what remained of them, clung to the rock face, their bodies contorted in silent screams, their eyes wide with terror. Some were kneeling as if in prayer, others were reaching out, their fingers spidery and skeletal against the darkness, and yet none of them seemed to feel the biting cold that clung to him like a shroud. They were trapped in an eternal summer, he realized, their flesh leathery and shriveled, their bodies suspended in time as if preserved by the very darkness that enveloped them. He stumbled back, his foot catching on a loose rock that sent a shower of pebbles tumbling down the shaft. The sound echoed in the stillness, drawing the attention of the silent figures. Slowly, deliberately, they turned their heads, their gazes boring into him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. Their lips, dry and cracked, pulled back in grotesque smiles, revealing teeth that were long and sharp, too sharp to be human. Their eyes, bottomless pits of darkness, seemed to suck the very light from his headlamp, leaving him in total blackness. He screamed and ran, scrambling blindly through the tunnels, the miners' laughter echoing behind him, their voices dripping with malice. He didn't dare turn back. He didn't want to see their faces, didn't want to hear their mocking laughter. All he could think about was getting away, escaping the clutches of the mountain that seemed determined to drag him down into its dark heart. His breath rasped in his throat as he ran, his lungs burning with the effort. The walls of the tunnel blurred into one another, the darkness a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother him. He tripped over rocks and fallen earth, scraped his palms on rough stone, but he didn't care. He couldn't care. He had to get away. Then suddenly, the tunnel opened into a cavern. Gasping for breath, he stumbled inside, collapsing on the damp ground. As his eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, he saw that he wasn't alone. In the center of the cavern sat a group of miners, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of a solitary lantern that hung from the ceiling. They looked up as he entered, their faces grim and weathered, their eyes hard and cold. The lantern, he realized, was the source of the unnatural warmth that pervaded the cavern, a stark contrast to the biting chill that lingered outside. It was an ancient lantern, wrought in iron and adorned with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering light. And around it the miners were gathered in a tight circle, their gazes fixed on the flame as if mesmerized by its dancing light. One of the miners, a wiry man with a scraggly beard, stepped forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice gruff and gravelly. "This place is not for the living." "I'm sorry," he stammered, scrambling to his feet. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just needed help. I was trapped in the tunnel." The wiry man shook his head, his eyes never leaving the lantern. "No help is given here, only taken," he said cryptically. He frowned, confused by the man's cryptic words. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice echoing in the vast cavern. The wiry man turned, his gaze boring into his. "This place is a bargain," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A bargain struck long ago between the miners and the mountain itself." He frowned, sensing that there was more to this place, more to the miners' strange behavior and the oppressive darkness that seemed to cling to the cavern walls. The wiry man continued, his voice low and urgent. "Long ago, when the mountain claimed one of our own, we made a deal. We would keep the lantern burning forever in exchange for his soul. It was a desperate bargain, struck in the face of death. For what is a man's life worth? A single flicker of hope, a single chance to survive, even if it meant trading one's very soul." He stared at the lantern, his mind racing. So these miners, they weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. They were trapped here, bound to this place by an ancient bargain struck long ago. And the price of that bargain, he realized with a shudder, was the very essence of their being. As if sensing his thoughts, the wiry man nodded grimly. "We are tethered to this place," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "forever bound to guard the entrance and keep the lantern burning, lest the darkness consume us entirely." He looked back at the tunnel entrance, now just a distant glimmer in the oppressive gloom. Behind him, the miners stirred, their eyes gleaming with a strange light in the shadows cast by the flickering lantern. Their movements were slow and deliberate, their gazes fixed on the tunnel as if watching something beyond his sight. Fear coiled in his stomach, cold and constricting. Whatever was coming, he knew he wouldn't be able to stop it. He turned to flee, but the wiry man stepped in his path, his eyes blazing with an unearthly light. "You cannot escape what is coming," the wiry man said, his voice echoing ominously in the cavern. "You have seen too much to remain ignorant of what is to come. You have awakened a slumbering evil, and now it stirs, hungry and merciless." The ground trembled beneath his feet, a deep guttural growl reverberating through the cavern. The miners, their faces now illuminated by an eerie green glow, raised their heads and let out a chorus of blood-curdling screams. The lantern above them swayed violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced and twisted on the cavern walls. He stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. From the depths of the tunnel, a shape began to emerge, vast and shadowy, its edges blurring in and out of existence. It moved with an unsettling grace, gliding forward on what seemed to be hundreds of legs that scuttled and clicked against the stone. Its presence reeked of decay and dust, of ages past and civilizations lost. The miners fell silent, their eyes wide with awe and terror as the shape glided into view. It was a creature of pure darkness, wreathed in shadows that writhed and twisted like living things. Tendrils of darkness snaked out from its form, lashing out and coiling around the miners, dragging them down into the gloom. Their screams echoed in the cavern, their pleas for mercy swallowed by the encroaching darkness. He watched in horror as the creature approached, its presence suffocating, its darkness a tangible thing that threatened to consume him whole. The miners' warnings echoed in his ears, their pleas for help mingling with the creature's growls. He wanted to run, to escape the clutches of the creature and the darkness that seemed determined to engulf him, but his feet were rooted to the spot. The creature loomed closer, its form solidifying, revealing a visage that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Its eyes, twin orbs of pure darkness, burned into his very being, stripping away all pretense, all hope of survival. With a final surge of strength, he turned and fled, stumbling blindly through the tunnels, the creature's guttural roars echoing behind him. He didn't dare look back. He didn't want to see the creature, didn't want to hear the miners' laughter mingling with its roars. All he could think about was escaping, outrunning the darkness that seemed determined to drag him down into its suffocating embrace. Ah, this is why no one stays in that town. Well, they do now. Hey, it's me. Welcome to Local 58 TV. This is our news. We're here to tell you what's going on in the afterlife. And this week we're covering all of the goings-on in the town of Galena, Illinois. Our lead story. The town has been cursed. It's something everyone knows. It's just something you feel when you walk down the street, see a ghost, talk to a local. They'll tell you it started right around the turn of the century. That's when things got real dark in Galena. Now, there was always a little bit of darkness there because this is northern Illinois, and let's be honest, anything north of Bloomington, Illinois, is cursed by the state. But the curse started back then. That's when the mines in town started closing and people were getting desperate. You know, they had dug up all the good ore already. What they had left was the bad stuff. Low-grade ore, almost worthless, but they needed money, so they did the only thing they could. They held a ceremony in the old shaft. They lowered a lantern into the darkness and they prayed to whatever they could that they would get rich. But not them, not anymore. They wanted someone else to find that gold. They made a deal with the devil. I mean, think about it. Why else would you lower a lantern into a mine shaft? Not like you can read with that. There's nothing magical about a lantern, unless you've got someone with you who's willing to trade their soul for untold riches. Because in the end, that's what happened. Their prayers were answered. Gold poured from the veins of the earth and filled the town's coffers. But at what cost? Oh, great! Just what I don't want to hear while drinking my coffee. Yep. See, when the townspeople struck it rich, the lantern began glowing brighter and brighter until it finally exploded. And when it did, the souls of these miners, along with the evil spirit that had possessed them, were fused into the heart of the mine. Some say the mine collapsed soon after, burying their bodies and their sin deep in the earth. Others say the miners, now free of the curse, sealed the mine themselves before moving on, leaving the spirit and their souls trapped inside. See, every year on the anniversary of the ritual, the spirit feeds on the fear of the townspeople, causing strange occurrences throughout the town. Like what? Oh, well, let's see. People experience unexplainable events. Sometimes it's as simple as hearing voices or seeing shadows out of the corner of your eye. Other times, though, it's more intense. Objects move or break on their own. Doors open and close on their own. Sometimes people even see full-bodied apparitions walking down the street or standing at the end of the bed watching you. And those are the lucky ones. The unlucky ones get touched. See, the spirit feeds off fear. Some say if you're touched by it, your soul is its next victim, condemned to wander the earth with the rest of them until it finds someone else to possess. Now, does it really do that? Can it possess you? No, 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 no. Historians have lived among the townspeople for decades, recording the events, trying to document proof of the curse. But so far, nothing conclusive. No one has ever been taken by the ghost. And really, possession is just an old wives' tale anyway. Look, I've seen a lot of ghosts. I've been on this show for 23 years, okay? And none of them have ever tried to possess me. And trust me, some of them have tried hard. I am an open vessel, all right? I'm like a Starbucks coffee shop. Come on in. Fill me up with your decaffeinated ectoplasm. Just don't try to possess me. But the stories kept coming in. People still reported weird stuff happening. So the historian decided he needed to visit the mine. He went down there and sure enough he felt it. The presence of the ghost, the oppressive weight of the curse. He reached out a hand as if to touch it, and in that moment, the entire nature of reality shifted. He saw it all. The ceremony, the explosion, the collapse. He heard their screams as they became one with the mine. And in that instant, he understood. He wasn't dealing with a ghost, he was dealing with souls. These men weren't evil. They were desperate. They hadn't made a deal with the devil. They'd simply asked for help. And what they got was a lifetime of riches bestowed upon their town. But at what cost? Their lives. And so when the historian emerged from the mine, he knew what he had to do. He gathered the townspeople together. He told them what he learned and he offered them a solution. They could keep the gold and keep the curse, or they could give up their riches and lift the curse. But the curse doesn't bother me. It's up to you. Oh, come on, guys. This is classic small-town dilemma stuff. You know, they're going to choose the gold, right? Yep. Of course they did. They couldn't bear the thought of giving up their prosperity. Not for some vengeful ghost, right? Wrong. After hearing the historian's tale, the townspeople decided to release the souls from their earthly prison. But not everyone agreed. A few townspeople didn't believe the historian's tale. They thought he was making it all up to drive people out of town. So they hid the lantern deep in the mine, hoping to find it someday and claim its power for themselves. Now, what happens next depends on which version of the story you hear. In some tellings, the historian and the townspeople who chose to help him were rewarded. The mine didn't collapse. The land around town flourished, becoming the most fertile it had ever been. And while the townspeople never forgot the sacrifice made by their fellow citizens, they were able to move forward, free from the curse. Other versions, not so much. Some say the historian and his followers managed to seal the mine, but not before the ghost took its revenge. Houses burned, crops withered, and the mine remained sealed, trapping the souls forever. Other versions say that once the mine was sealed, the lantern found its way back to the surface, glowing brighter than ever. The townspeople, greedy and desperate, set out to find it, plunging them all deeper into darkness, and that's the story of Galena, Illinois. Do you believe in curses? Let me know. Also, make sure you check out our other videos. We've got all kinds of great stories about history's biggest mysteries. And while you're at it, subscribe and ring that bell. If you love what we do, consider supporting us. We're on a website. Until next time, it's me. Welcome to my channel. It's me. This is the last episode of Lore. Please enjoy responsibly. A man walks into a bar. He sits down, orders a drink, and pulls out a worn leather journal. As he begins to read aloud, his voice echoing in the cavernous space, we realize that this is not just any man but a historian, and this is not just any story but one he has been researching for years. And then it hits us. This is not just any bar. It is the legendary Devil's Bargain. The historian tells us that centuries ago, the town outside was dying. The river had run dry. Crops had failed, and their once robust population had dwindled to just 77 souls. In desperation, the townspeople turned to rumors of a hidden vein of gold ore said to be concealed beneath the mountains that surrounded them. They assembled a team of miners, armed them with pickaxes, and sent them into the dark and dangerous depths below. But after weeks without success, hunger and thirst drove them to the brink of death. So they gathered around a rock, drew lots, and decided that 2 would stay behind to guard the lantern that illuminated their way out, while the other 3 would venture deeper into the mountain in search of water. Then they all agreed that if they found neither water nor gold, whoever was left behind would kill the others and take their place guarding the lantern until they were rescued or died trying. At the end of their shift, only 2 weary miners returned. Empty-handed, thirsty, and famished, they told the tale of how they had searched in vain for both sustenance and precious metals, but found nothing. So they stayed behind to guard the light, hoping that their replacements would have better luck. Now, many days passed, and still no one came. The miners grew weaker and weaker. Their skin stretched tight over their bones, their eyes hollowed with fatigue and thirst. But still they guarded the lantern until finally, overcome by exhaustion, they succumbed to death and fell before the light. When the next group of miners arrived, carrying barrels of water and sacks full of gold, they found the 2 men dead and the lantern burning bright. One of the miners, overcome by greed, reached out to touch it, but the moment he did, he was engulfed by a swirling vortex of darkness and disappeared. The others watched in horror as more and more miners approached the lantern, drawn by its mysterious glow, only to be consumed by the same swirling blackness. As the days turned into nights and the nights back into days, one miner noticed that those who touched the lantern never returned, and though he couldn't see inside the mountain, he could hear strange sounds coming from within. At first there were only whispers, voices that seemed to drift in and out of consciousness, carried on the wind. But as time went on, they grew louder, becoming moans, wails, screams, and even laughter. And so he told the others what he heard, but they refused to believe him. Greed, like a sickness, had taken root in their hearts, and they were determined to find the source of the mine's bounty. One day, however, while sitting by the entrance, he saw something incredible. A figure emerged from the opening, stumbling and weak. But as it drew closer, he saw that it wasn't a miner, but a grotesque parody of one, covered in grime and blood, with flesh hanging from its bones and matted fur growing in place of hair. It shambled toward him, moaning pitifully, and when it was close enough he saw its face, twisted and contorted in an eternal snarl. Its eyes glowed red, burning with an infernal fire, and then it vanished. Days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Yet every night the grotesque specter appeared, moaning, clawing at the earth, forever seeking release. Still, none of the miners would listen to his warning. Greed had blinded them to the danger. Then one night lightning flashed and thunder roared, illuminating the entrance to the cave, and standing in front of it was the grotesque figure. Then, as if beckoning, it raised a finger and stepped inside. Though terrified, the miner felt compelled to follow. Inside, he found himself in a vast cavern filled with towering stalagmites and stalactites, and in the center, suspended in midair, floated the lantern, now surrounded by the specters of the miners, each more ghastly than the last, and they were reaching out to him, beckoning with silent screams. Then, from the darkness, the grotesque specter spoke, revealing itself as the guardian of the lantern. It explained that long ago, desperate and starving, the miners had made a deal with an ancient evil, sacrificing themselves in exchange for untold riches. And now their souls were trapped here forever, doomed to wander the caverns until someone took their place. The miner learned that the lantern held the power to grant any wish in exchange for the life of the bearer. But being immortal and cursed to wander the caverns for eternity was a heavy price to pay. Still, he knew that the world above would never understand the horrors he had seen, so he chose to stay and keep watch over the lantern, accepting the curse upon himself. And though he was granted unimaginable wealth, it was a lonely existence, and the walls of the cavern echoed with the mournful cries of the damned. So the historian tells us that the devil's bargain is no myth, but very real. Anyone who touches the lantern will find untold riches waiting for them in the morning, but at what cost? For you see, when the miners went down into the mountain, they unwittingly opened the door to hell itself, allowing demons to flood into the mortal realm. Since then, there has been a constant stream of spectral figures emerging from the mountain, wandering the countryside in search of a way to return to the caverns. And should anyone touch the lantern, they will join the eternal torment of the damned, forced to wander the earth for all time. And so, if you ever find yourself in the town of redemption, be careful where you tread, for the ground is haunted by restless spirits, forever seeking peace. I can't help but wonder if the miners who ventured into the mountain ever realized the terrible mistake they had made. If given the chance, would they have chosen the same path again? It's hard to say. In their defense, though, they were driven by desperation, the need to survive, to find a way out of the impossible situation they had been thrust into. And perhaps they believed that the risk was worth taking, that the promise of gold and glory was a small price to pay for their freedom. After all, they had little to lose. Their bodies were already ravaged by hunger and thirst. And if they didn't try, if they didn't do something drastic, they would surely die. But even if they had known the truth, that the lantern was cursed and that the mountain was a gateway to hell, I don't think they would have hesitated. Because let's face it, who wouldn't be tempted by the promise of untold riches? Who wouldn't risk everything for a chance at glory and fame? The miners may have been ordinary men, but they were also human, driven by the same desires that consume us all. And in the end, they paid the ultimate price for their greed, condemned to wander the caverns of hell for all eternity. I can't help but feel a sense of sadness for these men, trapped in their own personal hell, doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. But I can also understand their motivations, their desire to escape the darkness and despair that surrounded them. Sometimes we make deals with the devil without even realizing it, sacrificing our morals and values in exchange for short-term gain. But, unlike the miners, we may not always be aware of the consequences of our actions. As I sit here in the dimly lit bar sipping my drink and listening to the historian's tale, I can't help but wonder what deals I've made with the devil myself, what sacrifices I've made in pursuit of my own personal goals. Maybe it's the thrill of the hunt, the desire to uncover the secrets of the past that drives me. Or maybe it's the need to understand the darkness that lurks within us all. Whatever the case may be, I know that I'm not alone in my quest for knowledge and understanding. There are others out there who are willing to brave the darkness, to face the horrors of the past in order to learn the truth. And though the road may be perilous, the rewards are immeasurable. For what is life without the pursuit of knowledge, without the desire to understand the mysteries that surround us? What is the point of existing if we don't strive to learn, to grow, to expand our understanding of the world around us? I raise my glass to those who seek the truth, who are willing to face the darkness in order to bring light to the world. May we always be brave enough to ask questions, curious enough to explore the unknown, and wise enough to understand the answers we seek. Thank you for joining me on this final episode of Lore. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to leave a like and subscribe for more content. And if you have your own tales to tell, I encourage you to do so. Share your stories with the world and let them be a source of knowledge and understanding for all who hear them. Until next time, may your own lantern guide you through the darkness, and may you always choose wisely when the devil offers you a bargain. You ever have one of those dreams where you're falling? You know, you're falling, and you can't seem to stop. Well, I had one of those dreams last night, and it was so vivid that when I awoke this morning, I could still feel myself plummeting through the air. And then I remembered. Oh yes, Black Hollow. It's been 10 years since I first came to this cursed town, and 10 years since I made a deal with an entity from beyond our reality. A deal that condemned me to walk the earth for all eternity seeking knowledge only to share what I find with those who seek me out in the dead of night. And yet, here I am, back in Black Hollow. Don't ask me how or why. All I know is that when I woke up, I was here. And now, here is where I must remain. See, I'm a historian. By trade, I travel the world over, seeking lost lore, ancient ruins, and long-forgotten tales. But sometimes my research leads me into places I shouldn't go, like Black Hollow. 10 years ago, I stumbled upon this town in the middle of nowhere while researching an old legend about a witch who lived in these parts. And I wanted to find her house and see if any trace of her magic remained. That's when the mist rolled in, and I found myself trapped within Black Hollow's borders. And there I met the townsfolk. They were all kinds of folks, a motley crew of men, women, and children, each with their own tale to tell. But none of them were willing to leave Black Hollow. They couldn't leave Black Hollow. It turned out they were bound to this place by some kind of curse, and then I saw them. Yeah, I saw them, the shadows. They lurked at the edge of my vision, coiling around the feet of the townsfolk, binding them to the ground with their icy grip. And then I heard a voice whispering to me, promising to free me from this place if I would do one simple thing: stay in Black Hollow forever. Basically, it was a host for the most offer, an exchange that has kept me here for the past decade. So, yeah, I've been stuck in Black Hollow for 10 years now, and I thought I'd come to terms with it, that I could live out the remainder of my days here in peace. I mean, I got a house, a bed, even a rocking chair on the porch, and I figured I could live out the remainder of my days here peacefully enough. I could watch the seasons change, maybe write a book or two, and eventually death would take me, and maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get some sleep. But no, apparently that's not to be. Because here I am again, standing in the middle of the road, watching the mist roll in, listening to the wind whisper secrets through the trees, knowing that somehow, some way, I'm going to be spending another year in Black Hollow. I don't know how I got here, but here I am. So I guess I'm stuck here again for another year. I wander down the empty street, passing by houses with boarded-up windows, their paint peeling and their porches creaking. No one's out today. I suppose they're hiding, waiting for me to pass by so I won't see their ghastly faces. And then I hear it. A lantern swinging gently from side to side, its light casting long dancing shadows across the ground. And then I see him. He stands in the middle of the road, his back to me, a black hooded cloak billowing around him like a phantom. In his right hand, he holds a lantern aloft, its glow illuminating the twisted branches of the gnarled old oak tree that looms over him. As he turns to face me, I see that his face is pale and drawn, his eyes hollow and black, bottomless pits of darkness that seem to stare right through me. He takes a step toward me, and I feel a chill run down my spine. This is him, or rather, this is what remains of him. When I came to Black Hollow 10 years ago, I saw this man walking down the street. I tried to speak to him, to ask him about the town and its history. But when I got close enough to touch him, he vanished, leaving behind only the sound of his lantern swinging in the breeze. He appeared to me then, or rather, I felt him watching me from the shadows, calling out to me, begging me to help him break the curse that held him and the other townsfolk captive in Black Hollow. At the time, I didn't know what to do, so I ran, fleeing through the mist until I found my way out of town. But he followed me, staying just outside my sight, his lantern swinging back and forth like a metronome counting off the seconds until I would relent. Finally, when I stopped to rest, he found me and offered me a choice. Help him free the townspeople from their shadowy prison, or become part of that prison myself, sentenced to roam the earth with him for all eternity. I knew then that if I refused, I'd never leave Black Hollow alive. So I agreed to help him. But after 10 years of searching, I'm no closer to breaking the curse than I was on the day I arrived. I've scoured every inch of this town, searching for clues, but all I found was a diary belonging to the witch who once lived here. According to her journal, she'd made a deal with a being from beyond our reality, trading her soul for knowledge and power. Now, just like me, the witch was doomed to wander the earth for all eternity, forever seeking answers that would never be revealed to her. And as the years passed, I began to envy her. At least she'd had a chance to make a choice. Me, I was cursed from the start, condemned to walk the earth without ever finding peace. And as I stand here watching the lantern-bearer approach, I feel that same despair rising within me. This is it, I think. This is how it ends. Then the lantern-bearer speaks. His voice is a raspy whisper, like the sound of dead leaves skittering across a graveyard. And he offers me the same deal he offered me 10 years ago. Help him free Black Hollow or join him in his eternal torment. And I realize then that this is my punishment, to be offered this choice again and again for all eternity, doomed to relive the same day over and over for all eternity. I want to scream, to tear my hair out, to do something, anything to break the cycle. But I can't. I'm frozen in place, trapped by the sheer monotony of it all. Then the lantern flickers, and for a moment, just a moment, the woods are silent. And when the light returns, the lantern-bearer is gone. I look around wildly, desperate for a sign, some clue as to how I can escape this place. But there is nothing, only the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. And as the mist begins to roll in, I know that soon the townsfolk will appear, begging me for help, offering me their friendship, their companionship. And I know that if I accept, I'll be trapped in Black Hollow for another year. So I turn and run, fleeing through the trees, hoping to escape before the shadows bind me to them. But it's no use. They reach out with icy fingers and drag me down, their cold seeping into my bones, stealing my warmth, my hope, my sanity. I struggle against them, but their grip is too strong. They pull me deeper into the woods, farther away from the light, farther away from the possibility of escape. And then I hear the voice, the same voice that has haunted me for 10 years, whispering promises of freedom, of release from this unending torment. I want to scream, to fight, but I can't. The shadows have taken my strength, my will, my very essence. And as they drag me deeper into the forest, I feel myself changing, becoming something less than human, something more like a shadow myself. And then I see it. In the distance I see the faint glow of a lantern, its light a beacon in the darkness. With a last surge of strength I break free of the shadows and stumble toward the light, desperate for a way out of this cursed place. But as I reach out to touch it, the light flickers and vanishes, leaving me alone in the darkness once more. The historian slumped to his knees in the dirt, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Above him, the trees creaked ominously in the wind, their branches clawing at the fading light. The diary slipped from his grasp, its pages fluttering to the ground like fallen leaves. As the mist rolled in, tendrils of darkness reached out and wrapped themselves around the historian, pulling him back into the shadows, back into the endless torment of Black Hollow. And with that, the story comes to its end. Oh, hey, you made it to the end of the video. Cool. Here's a blooper reel, I guess. Thanks for watching.